In the headlines, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan are set to sign an agreement to share their intelligence on North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Microsoft's Xbox Live and Sony's PlayStation networks experienced connectivity issues on Christmas Day. A hacker group claims responsibility. And corporate Korea struggles, seeing the lowest on-year sales growth in more than 5 years in the third quarter, hit by the unfavorable currency environment and a fall in oil prices. Happy Friday, everyone. Hello and welcome to ARIRANG News, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Tae. The threats emanating from North Korea are pushing South Korea, the U.S. and Japan closer together. With a military agreement that's set to be signed next week, they'll be able to share intelligence on threats from North Korea. Our Kim Hyun-bin reports.
In recent years, North Korea has been investing heavily in its missile capabilities and nuclear power, threatening the region and even Washington. To better deal with Pyongyang's threats, South Korea, the United States, and Japan are set to sign a memorandum of understanding to enhance military cooperation. South Korea, the United States, and Japan are set to sign a memorandum of understanding that has North Korea in mind. Seoul's defense ministry said that the vice defense ministers of the three nations will sign the trilateral pact on Monday. Once they do, it will alter the way information is shared between the three countries, so they can more promptly respond to North Korea's nuclear and missile threats. Right now, Seoul and Tokyo only exchange their defense information with Washington. Once the agreement takes effect next week, Washington will be able to relay that information to either nation, upon the consent of the country providing that information. The three nations tried to push ahead with a similar plan back in 2012, but that was scrapped due to opposition from the Korean public and lawmakers. Experts say there could be opposition this time around as well, but that is less likely because the three nations have toned down the agreement to reduce tensions.
We have to figure out the three key aspects of this new memorandum of understanding. Number one is it's scaled down from the minister level to the vice minister level. Number two is very specifically oriented specifically on North Korean nuclear and missile threats. Number three is it's not direct military intelligence pact with Japan. It's a very trilateral military intelligence sharing on North Korean threats.
The three countries began discussions for an MOU on sharing military intelligence in May during Shangri-La defense ministers' talks in Singapore. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
Some North Korea watchers say the North Korean regime might be ready for fresh inter-Korean dialogue. This after a former South Korean official said Pyongyang's top policymaker acknowledged that South Korea's sincerity toward improving bilateral ties. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
North Korea's official in charge of South Korean affairs says he understands President Park Geun-hye's sincerity about improving inter-Korean ties. Former Culture Minister Kim Sang-jae told the Yonhap News Agency that he passed on the South Korean leader's thoughts to Kim Young-gun when they met at the Kaesong Industrial Complex on Wednesday. In response, the North Korean official said he understands. He also showed a willingness to return to the negotiating table.
He said issues like the Mount Kumgang tours, the May 24 sanctions, and reunions for war-separated families can open up small roads that lead to bigger ones, eventually leading to peaceful improvements in South-North relations.
If true, it would mark a dramatic shift in Pyongyang's attitude. The regime had dismissed any improvement in relations under Seoul's current policies, which North Korea deems hostile. Some caution about the comments being blown out of proportion since they were not made in a high-level meeting. But others are paying close attention to the timing. They say it could signal Pyongyang's willingness to re-engage depending on Seoul's next moves, and add that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could extend an olive branch to the south in his New Year's speech. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News.
Following a recent hack attack on Sony Pictures, the word out of Capitol Hill is that more attention will be given to Washington's North Korea policy. This as the U.S. believes the hack attack was initiated by North Korea. Possible retribution measures such as more sanctions are being discussed. Connie Kim tells us more.
The U.S. is expected to clamp down on North Korea in light of the recent cyber attack against Sony. Diplomatic sources in Washington told Seoul-based Yonhap news agency that the Senate and the House of Representatives are seeking to pass a bill that will strengthen sanctions against the regime. Two separate bills that would have done that were recently scrapped as the current session of Congress expires next week. But lawmakers Ed Royce and Robert Menendez, who are behind this legislation, are expected to make a new push next year. The legislation is expected to include elements from previous set of U.S. sanctions imposed on North Korea in 2005 that limit North Korea's access to international financial institutions. The incoming chairman of U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations is reportedly on board with the move. Sources say similar efforts are being made at the State Department. Officials are reportedly seeking concrete ways to follow through with President Obama's pledge for a proportional response. Obama is expected to bring up the North Korea issue in his State of the Union address, slated for January 20th. Pyongyang has emerged as a hot topic in Washington due to the international spotlight on the North's abysmal human rights record. The UN Security Council added the North Korean human rights issue to its agenda earlier this month. The U.S. Congress, for the first time, passed a bill calling for a probe into North Korea's political prison camps in December. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
After that recent hack attack on Sony Pictures, this time Sony's PlayStation network is down on Christmas Day, and even after 24 hours or so, it's still experiencing connectivity issues. Our Kwon So-ah has the details.
Sony has received an unwanted Christmas present. The company's PlayStation network was down, with visitors to the site seeing that the page is under scheduled maintenance. This follows a 6-hour outage on Christmas Eve. A hacker group called Lizard Squad claimed responsibility for the problem, but did not state a motive. Despite speculation the outage may be connected to the release of Sony's film The Interview, there has been no clear indication. Microsoft's Xbox Live site, which has the film for sale and rent on demand, was also down on the same day. Microsoft and Sony have yet to comment on the hack, but say they are working to fix the issues. Nevertheless, it was on with the show, with a North Korea-based comedy film that sparked the whole thing. The Interview was released in 320 U.S. theaters at midnight Christmas Day, with fans generally enjoying the film, maybe more so because of the controversy surrounding it.
This is a film I probably would not have come to see, but because of the controversy, I thought I would come out tonight to stand up for freedom of speech.
I mean, it's funny, but it's definitely nothing that could topple a monarchy.
The Interview was originally pulled from all theaters by Sony because of threats of violence against cinemas and moviegoers. And the film is now also available online through video platforms like Google Play and YouTube Movies, and on its dedicated website, seetheinterview.com. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And here in South Korea, investigations into the recent cyber attack on Korea's state-run nuclear power plant operator are in full swing. Findings so far show the suspected hacker sent emails with hundreds of malicious codes to nuclear plant workers. The IP addresses of the emails are based in Shenyang, China, raising suspicions that North Korea might be involved in this case. The plant operator says it's requested a joint probe with China that will take weeks, though, before joint investigations can actually begin, given national security issues. Korean companies in general are trudging through tough times. Their sales as well as profitability in the third quarter dropped to levels not seen in many years. The Bank of Korea says the main culprits are the strengthening Korean won and a fall in oil prices. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Korean companies posted their worst quarterly performance in more than 5 years, mainly due to the strengthening of the Korean currency. The Bank of Korea says the combined sales of nearly 1,700 companies dropped by more than 3% during the July to September period from the same period last year. It was the second straight quarter of contraction. In particular, sales increases in the manufacturing sector dropped to its lowest level since 2009 in the wake of the global financial crisis. The sales performance of IT companies dropped by nearly 14% in the third quarter, the steepest drop since 2003 when the data was first compiled by the Bank of Korea. Also, combined operating profits dropped by a percentage point during the third quarter from the same period last year to 4.2%. Their profitability fell when converting their earnings into the local currency, as the Korean won strengthened 5% against the greenback in the third quarter compared to the same period last year. The poor overall performance is prompting companies to invest less. As a result, their combined debt ratio fell by more than 1.5 percentage points from the same period last year to nearly 93% in the July to September period. Kim Jeong, ARIRANG News.
Starting next year, large companies in Korea will be pressed to start spending their large cash reserves. If 80% of their after-tax income is not spent on either paying employees, shareholders, or making investments, they will face an additional tax. Our Hwang Ji reports.
The Korean government has finalized its tax scheme to encourage conglomerates to play a greater role in bolstering domestic demand. The finance ministry says that from next year, local manufacturers with equity capital of more than 50 billion won, or roughly $45 million, will have to spend 80% of their earnings after taxes on investments, raising wages, or paying out dividends. Otherwise, the companies will have to pay a 10% tax for the portion that falls short of the 80% mark. But companies in the service sector that spend less on facilities investment will only have to spend 30% of their after-tax income on wage and dividend payments. The new tax scheme is a temporary plan that will apply to business results for 2015 through 2017. It's aimed at boosting investment and revitalizing sluggish domestic demand during the current Park Geun-hye administration. The government expects more than 3,000 large companies and their sister companies to be affected by the plan. The plan comes as criticism mounts over large companies sitting on excessive cash reserves. Korean companies are notorious for paying out some of the lowest dividends in the world. Hwang Ji, ARIRANG News.
Commercial banks in Korea are planning to reduce the number of their branches. The prolonged low interest rate and widespread use of mobile and online banking services have made the downsizing even more inevitable. Our Lee Ji-yoon tells us more.
The recent launch of Daum Kakao's mobile money transfer service has prompted other tech firms to enter the race, and that spells potential trouble for the local banking sector. Prolonged low interest rates have made the situation even worse, with banks turning in some of their lowest performances in the recent years. 10% of branches are experiencing deficits, while banks' overall net profit has shrunk to 1/3 what it was 6 years ago. Around 90% of users who transfer money and check their balances use either mobile and online banking services or go to the automated teller machines rather than visit the bank in person. As this has been the case, banks have been forced to shut down more of their branches. Nonghyup is phasing out 34 branches, Kookmin 18, and Shinhan 6.
The downsizing or merger of branches has become an unavoidable solution. Banks need to strategize their profit system or seek other options like refining their banking services.
With the trend expected to continue for the time being, experts predict a huge wave of restructuring to hit the local banking sector next year. They warn that the closing of bank branches may be just the tip of an iceberg for what's to come. Lee Ji-yoon, ARIRANG News.
Despite the government's pledge to recruit employees regardless of their educational background, it looks like it's going to be tougher for high school graduates to find jobs at government offices next year. Data released by the Finance Ministry shows the number of jobs that will be offered to high school graduates in 2015 stands at slightly over 1,700. That's 11% lower than this year. Experts attribute this decline in the number of jobs available for high school graduates to the Park Geun-hye administration's focus on increasing part-time positions with flexible working hours. The government's plan to make religious groups pay taxes on their earnings has been postponed by 1 year to 2016. But given the time frame, some worry that this plan will never materialize. Our Park Ji-won explains.
The Korean government's attempt to impose tax on the earnings of clergy members will be delayed for 1 more year. The government was originally scheduled to start levying taxes on the nation's clergy members, like priests and monks, from the start of next year, which is less than a week away. But the Finance Ministry now says a tax on clergy earnings will start from January 2016. The ruling Sonry party had been asking for an even longer delay, reflecting demands made by some Protestant ministers. The ministry said it has decided to delay its plans for 1 more year only out of consideration that some religious groups are willing to voluntarily pay tax.
We want to pay tax as we live a life of honorary poverty and hope. We'll attempt to restore the essence of the clergy members.
The Catholic Church in Korea has already been paying income tax voluntarily since 1994, and Buddhist sectors in the nation are supporting the taxation. However, considering local elections are locked in for 2016 and a presidential election is set for the following year, some are concerned the January 2016 start date could be pushed back. Members of the clergy in Korea have enjoyed tax-exempt status since 1948. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Catching a cab during the late night hours can be quite a challenge here in Seoul, especially this time of the year with a lot of year-end parties and dinners. Now, the Seoul Metropolitan Government rolled out a new website today that should make people's lives a bit easier. The site provides real-time information on the location of taxis in the capital and whether they are vacant. The city hopes the information will be used by taxi drivers to spread out and cover more areas of the capital while guiding passengers to areas where cabs are available. The information is available on data.seoul.go.kr. There's also a smartphone app provided by Daum Kakao that relays the same information. Jordan confirms that one of its pilots has been captured by Islamic State militants after his warplane crashed over Syria. With more, we turn to Paul Lee at the News Center. Paul, this marks the first foreign military member to fall into the hands of IS since the U.S.-led airstrikes against this group started months ago. And it looks like now the family of this pilot is speaking out.
That's right. The father of the pilot, identified as Muath al-Kasebe, has pleaded for his son's safe release. Speaking to reporters in Amman, he stressed his son was a soldier who was merely following orders.
I do not want to describe him as a hostage. I call him a guest. He is a guest among brothers of ours in Syria's Islamic State. I ask them in the name of God, and I ask them with the dignity of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to receive him as a guest at his hosts and treat him well.
The emotional appeal came after images of the Jordanian pilot being dragged from the crash site by militants emerged on the internet. The group says they shot down the fighter jet with an anti-aircraft missile on Wednesday. However, U.S. defense officials rejected that claim without further details. Washington says the exact cause of the crash is still unknown.
And staying in this war-torn region, Iraq and Turkey have come together to strengthen their resolve in fighting this militant group. Turkey has been very open, Paul, in terms of accepting thousands of refugees fleeing the onslaught of violence by Islamic State militants, but has so far been reluctant in taking military action to address this threat.
Well, there are many deep geopolitical factors influencing that cautious stance. However, that being said, this latest pact between the Iraqi and Turkish governments signals a possible shift. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi traveled to Ankara on Thursday to hold talks with his Turkish counterpart. Both sides agreed to expand bilateral cooperation in dealing with what they describe as an international terrorist network.
Islamic State is a threat against the whole region, so we need to cooperate. We expect Turkey to expand its cooperation, and the Prime Minister has pledged that they will provide us with this support. We talked about expanding military, intelligence, training, and artillery support. A list was handed to Turkish officials, and our brothers told us they are ready to support us.
Turkey has been a hesitant partner in the U.S.-led coalition against IS, refusing to take a frontline military role. This despite sharing a 1,200-kilometer-long border with Iraq and Syria.
And let's turn to the United States. A massive snowstorm has hit the western half of the country, delivering a very white Christmas to millions of Americans. How bad is this blizzard?
Well, if you like snow and hitting the slope, it's the perfect holiday treat. But for others, it means digging out your car and hazardous road conditions. The National Weather Service said the winter storm dumped over 30 centimeters of snow on Thursday as it touched down in California. Forecasters predict long traffic delays as travelers face a steady stream of snow, rain, and fog as they head home this weekend. The Midwest is also expected to see a light layer of snowfall, while a preliminary flash flood warning has been issued across Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia.
And finally, Indonesia is marking the 10th anniversary since the Southeast Asian tsunami that killed hundreds of thousands of people. This was one of the worst disasters on record, not only in terms of loss of life, but also its sheer destruction. So how are people remembering the victims?
Well, thousands of Indonesians are paying their respects to the dead, while the government is continuing to take steps to ensure they'll be better prepared the next time a natural disaster of this unprecedented scale strikes again. An official memorial service was held in Banda Aceh, the worst hit area, back in 2004, where at least 168,000 people were killed. Indonesian Vice President Yusuf Kala thanked the international community for its support in the initial relief efforts, as well as the decade-long task of rebuilding.
This commemoration ceremony is not only to pray for the victims and thank the people around the world, but it's a time when we learn how to resolve the problem, as a lesson from tsunami taught us how to resolve a complicated problem by uniting as one.
The 9.3 magnitude earthquake 10 years ago on December 26 triggered a giant wave that laid waste to the coastal areas in more than a dozen countries. An early warning system spanning 28 nations has since been established in order to prevent future disasters. Charity?
All right, Paula, let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you again in just about 2 hours.
Good evening and happy Friday. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. We woke up to a brisk cold morning, but temperatures quickly rose to the moderate levels by the afternoon under clear skies. Well, chilly conditions continue to grip Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces, while dry weather advisories remain along the east coast. A cold snap is in store on Saturday morning, but things will ease up by the afternoon. Plus, there is a slim chance of flurries or drizzles in the central regions on Sunday evening. Looking ahead, it looks like more snow and showers are in store next week. Plus, a cold snap is expected on New Year's Day. On to Saturday's readings. Seoul makes it to 5, Gwangju hits 7, Busan reaches 10. On to other places. Jeju peaks at 10, Dokdo hits 7, Kumgang dips to -2. Wishing you a wonderful last Friday of the year and the last weekend of the year. That's all I have for you now, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that wraps up this edition of ARIRANG News at 8. Thanks for watching.